Good afternoon, and thanks for having me, Evan. So my name is Marlin, and I'm the CEO of Piccolo, which is a real-time body estimation API. So my co-founder Neil and I have known each other for over a decade. We've been close friends, for over a decade. We just came out of Y Combinator a few weeks ago, and we know this space extremely well because before this, we worked on AI software and infrastructure at companies like Pinterest and the Climate Corporation. The reason we started this company is because we realized there's so many sensors in the world, billions of them, and yet most aren't smart because they cannot understand what people are actually doing. For example, this is the airport nearest to us. You have hundreds of cameras, dozens of monitors, yet if you look at that screen, you actually have no idea what to focus on. And of course, many of us now have security cameras. And while some of them use simple techniques like face detection, we think a lot more is possible with really good body language understanding. So what does that mean? So in the last 3 months, the use case we've been most focused on is gesture control. And I'm about to play a video, and in this video, you'll see me walk down my stairs, control my 2 lamps with gestures, then my ceiling lights with a gesture, and finally, my TV with the final gesture. Check out this experience. Now, the best thing about this is that all the image processing actually happens server-side. The reason that's so important from a business perspective is because it means that we can approach existing camera companies and tell them that they can easily integrate it with our API. The other great thing about this is that it works with simple cameras. So this doesn't use any depth sensors, it doesn't even use stereo cameras. This works with just a single camera. So far, we've been testing this technology, and we're doing a beta in 30 households, and the early results are extremely positive. So around 3/4 of our users are daily actives, and on average, we're seeing 6 interactions per day. So that's six ways in which a person, on average, would control some of the devices in their home. We're also fortunate to have 2 strategic partnerships that we'll be partnering with over the next few months. Now, where things get really exciting is when you look beyond applications like gesture control. So we know that the core tech we have, the body language understanding, can be used for lots of other things as well. So one really important one here is understanding pedestrian intent for self-driving cars. Most of you have probably seen these bounding boxes around pedestrians. But I think that if you take this one step further and do this and understand exactly the position people are in, and then take that another step further and do this, you can understand how people are standing and what the probability is of them making a certain movement. The reason that's so important is because it lets self-driving cars drive much more robustly. So that's one example, and then I have 2 other quick ones. For the security use case at airports, this tech can be used to very quickly detect anomalous behavior, like violent events breaking out. And then in hospitals, this can be used to monitor patient activity levels. So you could, for instance, understand how much time they spent asleep, and you could also detect emergencies like seizures, for instance. So to summarize, we're a YC-backed startup building a body language recognition API, and we have an initial focus on gesture control. Our goals for this conference are 1, to meet talented engineers that want to work on this, and then 2, to also meet investors. We're closing a $1 million seed round soon, and it's 85% full now. So please come talk to us. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well done. Judges, who wants to go first? Anybody that hasn't spoken yet? Yeah, you want a mic? Want to pass the mic back? You can go next, Steven. Sure.
Thanks. Business model, is this a consumer subscription service?
We plan to partner with camera makers and make them pay large licensing fees. So we let camera makers own the relationship between the consumers and them.
Steven.
What part of this is technology that you built versus just a ton of data that you've ingested to build models, and how is it defensible?
Yeah, so we both have proprietary data and proprietary models. So the way the architecture works is that we have essentially 2 core models. The first one is the pose estimation, which gets the skeleton. We use our own data set for that and built our own architecture for that. And then we have models that sit on top for gesture control, for which we also have our own models and data. The reason it's competitive is because long-term, we can use data collection to basically make the pipeline better and better.
Sutian?
Can you speak more to go-to-market? You mentioned a couple of use cases, but they're in pretty different industries. What is most interesting to you?
So the first use case we want to focus on is the gesture control. So that is what's working now and is deployed in several households, 30 of them. So we just got an investor that's bringing on some strategic partners that we plan to partner with in the next few months for the gesture control use case.
What kind of applications would you not consider enabling?
Interesting question. So I think we wouldn't want to consider the ones that a lot of other people are doing. So one area where I see this kind of tech be deployed a lot is in retail. So you look at Amazon Go and their competitive space. I think there was a company pitching about that yesterday. We probably want to stay away from retail just because everyone's doing that.
Where does the data sit for this and training your models? Like, are you actually ingesting from the pilots into a centralized place? Or how do people think about that issue with privacy and surveillance?
Good question. So to make the gesture model works, which only requires like the skeletons as input, that model actually, sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, just where does the data sit? Because I would imagine you're training the model over time with some of the pilots. So how do people think about privacy if they're putting this in their home?
Right. So for our main model, which sits on top of the skeleton tracking, we don't collect people's images. We just collect the location of their joints. And that isn't typically a privacy problem for people because it's not the images that we're storing.
Could you just talk a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of the competitive landscape and where you're ahead or what other players might be shifting to this skeletal model?
Yeah, so in the gesture control space, what we've seen is that most other players are trying to use different kinds of sensors. So Connect and others, they use depth sensors. And the issue with depth sensors is that they're much more expensive, and they typically don't work at a very wide field of use. So there's very few people who are trying to make this work with just a simple camera. And we think that's so important because if we want to give this capability to most of the cameras in the world, then we'd want it to work with the most popular camera.
Any last questions, Renaud?
What would it take to bring it to the edge instead of sending everything to the server?
Actually, our first prototype was on the edge, and it required a Jetson TX2, and it ran at 1/10 the speed. So I don't think for a few years.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marlin. Thank you, judges, for that.